Israel wants the United States to lose this war. And so that means a long war that destroys the American political will to fight any more foreign wars. If America loses, Israel becomes the dominant power in the Middle East. So let's look at the four major players in this war. You have US, you have Israel, you have Saudi Arabia, and you have Iran. Okay? All right? So the United States and Iran, they're pretty easy to understand. What the United States wants to do is destroy Iran. Okay? Why? Because if we were to destroy Iran, the United States would have complete control over Middle East oil, and it would control global trade for the Strait of Hormuz. And therefore, the United States can maintain its empire, okay? So a really simple objective. Let's destroy Iran. We don't care how, we don't care why, let's just go do it, okay? Iran has another strategy, which is control Strait of Hormuz and destroy CENTCOM. CENTCOM is basically the American military in the Middle East, called Central Command, okay? So those are two major military objectives of Iran. And we can understand why. Because if CENTCOM is destroyed, Iran has complete control over the Middle East. Now, Dubai, now Oman, Bahrain, Kuwait have to pay taxes to Iran. Now Iran, the new kid, is now the bully of the Middle East, right? Now it's the hegemon. That is the political objective of this war, okay? Israel is a bit more complicated, all right? For Israel, sorry. One other thing is humble Israel. That's the other thing, because even if you defeat the United States, you still have to deal with Israel, okay? And Israel is the great military power of the Middle East. So you want to humble them. You want to weaken them. You can't destroy Israel because Israel has nuclear weapons, right? You piss off Israel, those nukes start flying. You don't want that, right? So those are the three major political objectives for Iran. Control the Strait of Hormuz, destroy CENTCOM, and humble Israel, okay? If you are Israel, actually for you, the strategy is different. What you want to do is this. You want to destroy CENTCOM and destroy Iran. Okay? Those are your objectives. Why? Because if you destroy both the United States and you destroy Iran, then you are the sole hegemon in the Middle East. Okay? Also destroy the GCC. Destroy Saudi Arabia as well. Why? Because once Saudi Arabia is destroyed, all its resources belong to you. Okay? And this creates something called the Greater Israel Project, which is what we will discuss next class. But as you can see, that's really important, is that even though the United States and Israel are allies, their ultimate strategy is different. Their objectives are different. In fact, they're in conflict, okay? Then you have Saudi Arabia. What does Saudi Arabia want to do? Well, destroy Iran, because if you destroy Iran, you have complete control of the Strait of Hormuz. Then you can be the bully, okay? But you also want to destroy the US and you want to humble Israel, all right? Does that make sense? All right? So by understanding how each player perceives the game, we can now understand how they will go about their strategy, right? So the United States just wants to destroy Iran. But as you can see, Israel, Saudi Arabia, and Iran all want to destroy the United States. And how do you do that? You do that by forcing the United States into a long ground war, right? Therefore, if you're Israel, you don't want to use nukes. Why? Because nukes would end the war too quickly. You want to drag this war out as long as possible to force the United States to send in ground troops. And then you're like, well, why doesn't the United States use nuclear weapons? And the answer is already told you, the escalation ladder. It needs to justify itself to the people, okay? When you do anything, all right, when you do anything, you have to worry about certain factors, okay? You have to worry about troop morale. Your soldiers have to believe that they are fighting for a good cause, okay? You have to worry about public opinion. You have to make sure that the world is on your side. You have to worry about politics, political will. You have to make sure the people are unified, and you have to worry about enemy morale. You don't want to piss off your enemy so much that they go into an extreme, they jump the escalation ladder to extreme beyond your control. Okay, does that make sense? Okay? So as you can see, war is extremely complicated. It's not just about weaponry. It's not just about resources. It's ultimately about controlling the narrative, controlling the political landscape, okay? Marshaling the resources in a proper way that is strategically beneficial, all right? Does that make sense to you guys? Okay, so, so we just answered two questions. Will the United States use ground troops? Yes, it will, because Iran, Saudi Arabia and Israel will work together to force a ground invasion, even though the United States doesn't want to do so. But unfortunately, the United States doesn't have a clear, coherent strategy. It's passive. Therefore, it can be manipulated into sending a ground invasion, okay? And the second question is, will Israel and the United States use nuclear weapons? And the answer is no, because it's not in their best interest to use nuclear weapons, okay? Israel wants the United States to lose this war. And so that means a long war that destroys the American political will to fight any more foreign wars. If America loses, Israel becomes the dominant power in the Middle East, okay? And so the last question is the Al-Aqsa Mosque. And we'll answer that next class on Thursday. Any questions?
Will Americans take over Iran like what they did to Venezuela? Like they captured their president?
Okay, look, the strategy in the beginning was to do a Venezuela in Iran. Meaning you go in, you kill the leader, a new leader emerges to negotiate with you and surrender to you because you're too powerful, okay? But Venezuela and Iran are two very different countries. The Venezuelan elite is very pro-American, meaning that their wealth, their children, their family is stored in America. Therefore, the Venezuelan elite have a vested interest in negotiating a deal with America to protect their own interests. But for 40 plus years, America has sanctioned the Iranian elite, and Iran has become poor and angry and disgruntled because of that. Therefore, they lose nothing by fighting you. Okay? So even though you've killed the supreme leader, and you've killed many of their leaders in fact, the elite themselves are unified in opposing you. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, any more questions? Yep.
So I in fact have a question about the motivation of US to involve in this war. Like as you said that US want to control all the oil, so like they must destroy Iran. But I think this is like a little bit confusing because I think US know that this war is really highly risk and it can potentially even like destroy the whole systems. So why US risk the risk of like whole system collapsing to like control the oil that Iran had?
Okay, all right. So this is the key question that everyone's arguing about. Quite honestly, we're going to argue this for the rest of eternity, okay? We're gonna argue this for eternity because like no one knows. And there's never gonna be a clear answer. In fact, there are multiple possibilities, okay? What I'm gonna do today is offer you the most simple explanation. In the next class, I will offer you a much more complicated explanation, okay? But the simple explanation is this. Again, this goes back to military doctrine, how the United States military works, okay? And the military doctrine is prevent the heartland from arising, right? So the United States is here, this is Europe, this is Russia, this is Iran, India, China, Japan, this is Middle East, and this is Africa. All right, so the American military doctrine is this. The greatest threat to American power is the heartland unifying, okay? Why? Because if the heartland unifies, it can trade by itself through railways. But America is primarily a naval power. Therefore, it requires people to trade by sea, okay? And so its strategy is to make sure there's never any cohesion in the heartland, either by making sure that no great power arises in the heartland, and that's why America went to war in World War I and World War II, because there's a great fear that Germany would conquer the world, or Europe, and Asia and create the heartland, okay? Therefore, America had to stop Germany from rising. So you either make sure no great power arises, or you create so much conflict that they're always fighting each other. And that used to work before, okay? Now, there's a problem. The problem is the BRICS nations. Russia, Iran, and China are coming together. And if they come together, guys, that's a major piece of the heartland. And everyone else, Europe, Middle East, Africa, India would probably follow, okay? Because it is easier to trade in the heartland than it is trade with America, especially with the US dollar declining, right? So, in other words, the United States has no choice but to fight this war because that's their entire strategy to maintain hegemony in the world, to prevent the heartland from unifying, all right? Does that make sense? Because like once you destroy Iran, the heartland fractures. There's no way that they can now trade together anymore. They're still reliant on American maritime routes, okay? America is still the hegemon because it controls world trade. Whoever controls world trade controls the world. Whoever controls the heartland controls world trade. I want to introduce a new idea to you, okay? It's called the law of proximity. The law of proximity, the idea is this. Whenever you play a game, you're not just playing one game. You're playing many, many different games. And the game that you choose to play is the one that is most proximate to you, the one that is most close to you. And that impacts your decision making the most. Okay, so that's a law of proximity. So let me explain to you what this means using an analogy, okay? Let's just use your life. You are playing actually multiple games every single day, all right? So let's examine this. The first game you play, of course, is the family game, right? So you might have parents and you have siblings, okay? And the game you're playing, of course, is to win attention from your parents. And to do so, depending on who your siblings are, you might use different strategies, including doing well in school or being a pain in the ass. Unfortunately, my kids choose to be a pain in the ass, okay? Yes. The parents are playing another game, which is social prestige, right? So they're competing against other parents to have the best family possible, all right? So, and then not only do you play a game at home, but you also play games at school, right? Right? So when you go to school, you're competing against your classmates for attention and popularity, but you're also playing a game in the school to get the best grades so that you can get into a good college, right? Then you go to work where you're competing in order to win the favor of your boss and to be popular among your colleagues. Then you play a city game where you live in Beijing and you want Beijing to be better than maybe Shanghai or Shenzhen, okay? And then you play a game of maybe a nation where you want China to be stronger than Japan, okay? So as you can see, every single day you're playing multiple games, even though you may not recognize it. And again, what's important is the game that is most important to you is the game which you are most close to, right? The one that you can see in front of you, okay? Does that make sense, okay? But this is also true for nations as well, where we think that the game is between nations, but really the game is within nations. And the conflict within nations is the one conflict that determines how nations behave against each other. All right, so today what we will do is we will look at 3 examples of this, okay? We will look at the civil conflicts in America, in Israel, and in Iran to figure out why they behave the way they do, and then figure out how this war will progress. Okay, so clearly there is a civil conflict right now in America. Okay, you have the Democrats and you have the Republicans. Now what's odd is that even though these 2 different political parties are at war with each other, they both support the war because their calculus is different. Okay, so why do the Democrats support this war? Well, it's because they believe that this war will be extremely unpopular in America, which will allow the Democrats to dominate in the midterms in November and then win the presidential election in 2028. And they believe that this war will be so unpopular, it will destroy Donald Trump and allow the Democrats to rule forever. It will basically destroy the Republican Party, all right? And so that is your strategy. And if you think about it, it actually makes a lot of sense. The Republicans have a different strategy, which is this war may be unpopular, and this war may make America lose, but it's okay. Why? Because in a time of war, the president has something called the Emergency Powers Act, okay? Emergency powers. Emergency powers allows the president to essentially suspend the Constitution and to suspend or delay elections. Also, the Republicans want to pass something called Safe America Act, okay? The Safe America Act, which means that if you are a voter, you must present ID in order to vote. And you think that this is, well, reasonable, But historically, the idea of checking ID is a way to discriminate against minorities, right? To have police officers there to scare minorities. And that's traditionally how racism was enforced in America. Okay? So in other words, the Republicans have many different strategies of either cheating or manipulating the elections. They could also, I have to say this, but if the war's going really badly, what they will do is call up a national draft and cancel the elections, okay? All right? So these are two different strategies going on. But as you can see, this is not really about America defeating Iran. This is really about the Democrats or Republicans trying to obtain power and keep it, okay? All right, but what's important for us to understand is that it's not just about the Democrats and Republicans at war with each other. There's actually a much deeper divide in America, okay? And this divide is a conflict between the elite and the counter-elite. Remember how we introduced the idea of elite overproduction, right? This is the Peter Turchin idea. And he argues that what leads to civil war is that you have too many elite who want to be the ones in power. Power is a zero-sum game, and therefore, when you have elite overproduction, they have to go to war against each other in order to have the power, okay? And so, what's going on? Who are the elite and who's the counter-elite? Well, I mean, to put it very simply, the Democrats represent the elite, and the Republicans represent the counter-elite, okay? So, basically, the elite is the empire. And counter-elite is MAGA, which is America First. And so they have two different ideals for America. The empire is to maintain the current global order, right? And MAGA is to retreat back into the Western Hemisphere and focus on Americans' core national interests, right? They're also divided into finance and AI, okay? So in other words, Wall Street are the main backers of the current elite, and then Silicon Valley are the main backers of the counter elite, okay? So these people are interested in maintaining the status quo. They are interested in a revolution, right? And so this is the main divide in America that will eventually lead to a civil war, like an actual civil war, okay? But right now, they're fighting over foreign policy. So I will discuss this more in the future, okay? But I present to you now. So let me give you a concrete example of why they're fighting. Why are people in finance fighting with people in AI? And there's a very good reason. Because if you're able to control Washington, D.C., if you're able to control the levers of government, you're able to make a lot of money for yourself, okay? So let's look at this concretely. Okay? What people don't really understand is that both finance and AI are bubbles that will burst. They're parasites, okay? So finance is a parasite because there's something called a private credit bubble, all right? Credit bubble, the idea of private credit is very simple. Rather than banks issuing loans to companies, companies privately issue loans to other companies. And you would think that these companies would be very careful with who they lend to and how much they lend to, right? That's not true though, okay? Why? Because in 2008, these banks destroyed the global economy and the American government bailed them out, right? They suffered no consequences. This idea of moral hazard. If you do not suffer consequences for your stupidity, well, you're just going to be more stupid in the future, okay? So these companies believe that we control Washington, D.C., therefore we can be as risky and stupid as we want. So they're giving out lots and lots of silly loans to companies because they collect a fee for these loans, right? And then when these loans don't actually work out, meaning the companies go bankrupt, what they do is they say, oh, we'll lend you some more money to keep afloat, okay? So now this problem has reached about $2 trillion. And so they think that, okay, well, worst case scenario, the government will bail us out if we all go bankrupt because we're too big to fail. And all our friends are in government, okay? That's their mentality. And in 2008, that worked. But there's a problem today, which is there's also another group that's doing the same crap, okay? And it's called the AI bubble. All right, so if you look at AI bubble, you got companies like Microsoft, OpenAI, Oracle, NVIDIA, okay, lots and lots of different companies. And the way they operate is they just lend money to each other, okay? It's like, I give you $1 billion, then you give me $1 billion, and now we have $2 billion. It's a circle jerk. And it's getting a lot of money from the GCC and other investors. The problem, of course, is what's happening in the war, right? So if the GCC can no longer put more money into this bubble, then eventually this bubble will have to burst. But they're like, that's okay. Why? Because we control Trump. We control the White House. We are the stock market. Therefore, Washington, D.C. will bail us out, okay? So that's the war going on, where you have two parasitic forces, the finance sector and the tech sector, and they are all looking for government bailouts when their bubble bursts. But the government doesn't have infinite money. It can only bail out one side, right? So they're going to fight over the government. They're going to fight over who bails who out, okay? If the Democrats can win the House and the presidency in 2028, then the private credit people will get bailed out. But if Trump and his people stay in power in 2028, then the AI people will get bailed out, okay? So that's the civil war going on in America right now. We'll discuss this more later in the future, but I just present to you right now, okay?